Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of Dynamics Fortnite Fridays.
Where we cover everything Dynamics great and small. Welcome to July, Bart.
Yeah, whole new fiscal year and everything, right?
That's right. All kinds of things are happening at Microsoft. So has everybody read in the news? But kind of interesting. But on
You're
a
looking,
better note and a
you're looking
funnier
kind of
note,
digital today, Dan.
I know it's like I'm having connectivity issues for my location where I'm at. So I thought I went Avatar, but this is a good looking avatar, so I'm sticking with it.
It works for
Yeah.
me.
Yeah. So speaking of like kind of like jokes the way I look or anything like that, do you have a dad joke for me?
Sure. So this morning, my youngest son, Parker, who is a rising sophomore in college,
Yeah.
was blessed with the opportunity to get his wisdom teeth removed. And he had all four removed, including some bone from his bottom jaw. So he's going to be kind of a hurting unit over the next week, I'm sure.
Oh, so
And
this
he
is not a
came,
joke. This is real. This is yeah.
that part is real.
Yeah.
He has decided he wants a big long movie list of something to do while he's recovering.
Okay.
And so I told him one of the things he should really try to watch is that documentary with Al Gore from about 15, 20 years ago that's an inconvenient tooth.
So, oh, it's truthfully, that's a bad joke.
Wasn't
But
it?
yeah,
Toothfully?
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Truthfully, it is. Yeah. Okay, so I'm pulling from the deck again today.
Oh,
So
we
don't know
can't
what this
see
is
the
going to
poll
be.
this time, but what
You
do you
can't see
got?
the poll, but I am pulling from the deck. People say they picked their nose, but I feel like I was just born with mine. Oh my God, that was terrible.
Oh, oh, oh,
That
oh,
was
oh,
awful.
oh.
Oh God. Oh,
All
as
right,
always,
well,
our
here we
content
go.
better be better than our jokes today. So, so
There's
what do you
there's
got for
quite a
me,
bit of
Bart?
it, but hopefully we can cover it fairly
Yeah.
quickly. So, some of these are just really cool, either LinkedIn or blog posts that I have seen recently that I thought would be super helpful for our community. So let's start with one of the things Remy Dion put out there was he had run into a situation where he needed to have access to the entire conversation within the context of the conversation at runtime when in a Copilot Studio agent and discovered that what shows up in Dataverse is way too delayed. There's like a 30-second delay before all the things in your conversation actually get written into the conversation data table. But what he did find was that if you kind of scroll down here, that using the direct line API, that he could actually pass a parameter in that said, for this conversation ID that I'm having right now, if I call direct line API, that it will return the entire conversation in real time that you may need to pass back into a prompt to have it analyze that for context or whatever else you might need. So thought this was totally worth throwing out there for anyone who is doing some of that higher end stuff in Copilot Studio that might need an entire conversation kind of transcript at runtime. Next one, I thought this was, I mean, a lot of people are doing this kind of stuff already, but this was just really well done, just talking about how important instructions are for telling your agent what they should do and some sample prompts for once you have your ideas pulled together of how to drop that into Copilot to let Copilot actually write the instructions for you in a way that it will then reinterpret much more clearly than if you just try to write them yourselves. So again, not rocket science, but I thought was super helpful for trying to get better instructions for the agents that you decide to write. If you're working very much in the low code space, and you are kind of a serious dev, that you probably are doing some of the Git connectivity that we have enabled in Power Platform that can tie either to an entire environment or just to a solution that you're working on. And as you're doing that, especially in a multi-developer environment where you're having multiple people dev on the same asset, that you need to think through your Git branching strategy and how that might work to enable each developer to have their own branch that they work in and merge that back into main after they've kind of done their work. and how to tie that to the solution or the environment as desired. So this was a well-written, fairly clearly articulated treatise on what he found in trying to make that work in some organizations and situations that he ran into. So take advantage if that will help your use cases. Another team did some interesting sort of A/B testing in Copilot Studio to say, am I better off curating a knowledge source as knowledge inside of my agent and trying to be very specific and give it some synonyms and all those kind of things as a knowledge source? Or should I just use a well-written MCP server in order to have Copilot Studio sort of answer questions? And so they went through quite a little bit of kind of what knowledge does, what MCP is, all that kind of stuff. And they decided to use the Microsoft Learn repository, since there is now a Microsoft Learn MCP agent that is open source that you can just connect up to and use, and did some comparative tests. And just to net it all out for you, they found the MCP server did a better job with more complete, richer answers to make sure that users got the best possible information. And it's the least amount of work for the person making it in terms of trying to get a good setup curated and enabled inside of your agent. So win-win, go MCP whenever you can. Next one is actually kind of M365 related, but I thought it was so important that I wanted to cover it on this show, that we have enabled in public preview a new API called the Retrieval API. And this Retrieval API lets you basically query the M365 Copilot compendium of information that it stores in the semantic index and bring that back through that API so that you can do things with it. It will already be secured. It already has been curated and indexed, so you don't have to go build all that yourself. It's fast performing because it was a well-architected API in the first place, and you can get to it through the Microsoft Graph. So it's pretty straightforward in terms of knowing how to interact with the graph in order to do this. So I just wanted to at least get that out there. I know there's kind of an easy button inside of Copilot Studio to say, use the knowledge graph that will do something kind of similar, but sometimes you want a little bit more bespoke control, and this is a way to get there. So I wanted to call that out. Power Pages. So we keep getting more and more code friendly with a lot of our low code tools. What this is basically talking about is in preview now, you can go out and in React, go build your React single page app using all the things that you typically do as a typical web dev building React sites. And when you build that single page app, you can publish it to a Power Pages site so that Power Pages is the hosting infrastructure and has all the authentication and all the other schemes that Power Pages brings to the table. You just get to go code up your SPA and publish it out into our site. So that's the nuts and bolts of it. That's a lot of the details in a demo and sort of more kind of verbose ways to treat that topic are all on the post. So I'll let you look at it at your convenience. Data loss prevention, or the connector rules inside of Power Platform, are hugely important from a governance standpoint. I'm kind of getting the tongue tied a little here today. And we have just made a couple of new improvements in the way those DLP policies work. So wanted to sort of talk a little bit about this. One of the big things is we have now enabled, when you're defining your policy, or at least it's coming very, very soon. I didn't go look to see if it was live right now or not, but to have triggers be something that you can manage within a policy. So if the connector, before you were only able to manage actions, but if the connector has triggers, not all of them do, but many do, and it is supported in this scenario, that you would be able to say, well, there's a trigger here that I don't want you to be able to use with this connector, so I can shut it off with policy, even though it's part of the connector. Those kind of things are coming. Endpoint filtering for the browser automation inside of Power Automate desktop flows. So being able to say, well, if you're going to be able to use the RPA capabilities of using a web browser, I want to be able to say, well, there's these pages that I'm not going to let you put automation on top of by policy. And that's coming very, very soon if it's not out. Using these environment variables to migrate configuration data as part of the solution management from environment to environment is important. And always before, whenever you built a DLP policy and published it, in the back end, when you were in design time, it would look at all of those policies and try to make sure that they were correct and would try to rifle through things. But it didn't ever do anything at runtime to make sure that at runtime it was being enforced correctly. Well, we have now, as of last month, completed the rollout of runtime enforcement. So that should now be happening at runtime to make sure that there weren't some changes made that didn't get caught at design time, that it needed to be enforced when someone was doing something. Also, when we would make a policy change that might say whatever was out there for a Cloudflow can't happen now because of the new policy that was just enacted, it will deactivate those flows. And if you recognize that, always before, once it deactivated it, it just left it in that state, in suspended state. But now, if you make that change and you recognize that that was something you didn't intend and you reverted back to the original policy or changed it so that at least some of the Cloudflows could then function still because of that within 7 days, that it will automatically reactivate any actual compliant Cloudflow based on the newest policy as long as it hadn't been deactivated for more than 7 days. So another big thing that should help admins do their job and not have so much business impact if it was a mistake. And then lastly, for large tenants, that those large scale policy changes would often take a long, long time to rifle through all these systems, and we have improved that significantly to make that happen faster. So lots of pretty good stuff out there in the DLP and enforcement realm of Power Platform. All right, gotta have quite a few things here that should be quite quick because they were really just announcements that I found in the message center that I thought were worth calling out. So as a new feature in Copilot Studio, when you are using Knowledge instead of MCP, and you've got a bunch of different knowledge repositories from a files perspective out there that you're trying to interact with, well, now you can group those together into groupings of those files and put special descriptions around a grouping of files to say, well, here's when you should look at this group versus the rest of the files to the LLM so that it has an idea of how to scope its calls to special groups and ignore the other groups for the questions to get asked that are pertinent for only one set of files and not the whole thing, just to make it have better, more concise answers. Another one is if you use our CI Journeys tool for the Customer Insights Marketing Automation, if you have some sort of unplanned event and because of that you need to pause Journeys for a little bit, before it was kind of a nightmare to go back and get those journeys all working again. Well, now you're able to just pause them and resume them as desired whenever some unplanned event comes up instead of like unpublishing them or whatever that you might have had to do in the past. So a nice streamlining thing for when something unexpected pops up and the journeys aren't needed at the moment. If you use our contact center as a service capabilities, whether that's in Dynamics 365 or standalone tied to some other CRM system, but you're using it for your call handling, that before you always had to consult with whoever you may need to transfer a call to and have that quick conversation before being able to actually transfer it. Well, we've decided that while that's still a good idea much of the time, we're not going to enforce that as the only way we can make things happen. And you are now allowed to just transfer a call from one person to another without having to go through the console. In Copilot Studio, as of the end of this month, we will be able to publish agents into WhatsApp in addition to all the other places that we can publish today. So another new channel is coming soon. If you use the Customer Insights journeys and you have events that the journeys are managing, One of the things that we didn't have until very, well, that's not going to be available until, or generally available until the end of the month, but that is coming very soon, I guess, is the ability to put a wait list on there and to have it automatically watch for people to sort of unlist themselves if they had already sort of subscribed to an event, or I guess said they were coming, reserved a spot, if you will. If they sort of remove themselves from the reserved spot, then the wait list that we allowed people to put themselves on will automatically add them until all slots are full without you having to do very much work. So nice improvement there for your events. If you used our contact center capability to add some functionality to a bespoke mobile app that you made for iOS or Android to provide a mobile support experience for your organization, and you wanted to be able to use the SDK when creating those mobile support apps to put a message into our contact center in text, or to dial our contact center and get into a queue directly, or a special queue or whatever from the mobile app experience, that is all now possible through things that we have enabled in our SDK layer, or the API layer of our contact center space. So use those if that is applicable to you. Desktop flows, one of the things that we are turning on at the end of this month is to put built right into the Power Automate desktop client. It will be a testing framework to be able to assert and test the flow without leaving the harness that you're working in right now. You won't have to jump out into some other tooling in order to be able to do some testing of your flow, and not just like simulated, but like have it do automatic testing and report out results from within that console. So another nice improvement there for Power Automate Desktop. All right, back to some more kind of blog post things. So the kind of summary of all the things that came out in Power Apps in June is now live. Many of these we've already talked about. So last show we talked about enhanced component properties being generally available for Power Apps. We also talked about how the untyped object has been renamed to the dynamic object to more closely follow C#. But this one actually was news to me, that this is brand new from my understanding anyway, that when looking at audits of choice data fields, it's always been the case that what got audited was the numeric value under the covers. That was the value that the end user selected from the way the database understood things. And we would present the current label that was tied to that number in the audit trail, because that's just kind of how things always worked. Well, you'll now have an option when looking at the audit trail to say, do I want to look at whatever the current label is, if it had been relabeled in terms of that number, or do I want to look at the original label that was there at the time the data was saved? And that's kind of a big deal for some folks, so that they don't have to kind of remember what date did we change this and figure those kind of things out. So nice to know. If you happen to use customer managed keys in Power Platform, that it used to take a long time every time you would change one of those customer managed keys in a very large organization to rifle through all of the places that encryption was being applied to when you made that change. Sometimes up to 4 days for that encryption to reach all services. Well, we have now changed the way that works and streamlined it so that it will happen much, much quicker. And I didn't get a whole lot of data on how much quicker, but there will be at least an ability to start using the services that have been encrypted not long after you have put the new key in. And there will be other services that, while your key is being applied and encrypting them, may be unavailable as ancillary services, but you can at least get to the core things much quicker. I think that's a good update. User-defined functions, again, got called out. Not sure why it was in there twice, to be honest. But as always, Clay puts in a bunch of links in here to things that have been updated in our training modules and in our documentation across many different pivots. So take a quick browse through those, and if any apply to you, take a look at some of the new documentation out there as well. Same idea, Copilot Studio. What all was the new stuff in June? So this has been posted as well. In Agent Builder, so not quite in the Copilot Studio full client, and it's really interesting that since Copilot Studio is the backend for Agent Builder, that there are a couple of things that showed up there that aren't in full-blown Copilot Studio. So the one that's called out here is being able to look at Outlook email, Teams messages, and things like that, group chats, other things that happen from a collaboration standpoint in M365 Copilot. Those can now be used as knowledge repositories to have it look across all of those and surface data from them as part of your bespoke agent and not just the M365 Copilot native experience. So that's a big deal. The other one that's out there that I don't know how to work with in full-blown Copilot Studios work is that in Agent Builder, you can use, oh shoot, what's it called? My brain just went blank. Anyway, it's basically the ability for it to reason to do math and other sort of Python type things. There's a special toggle you can turn on in Agent Builder to let it do that. And since it's not in front of me, it's just slipped me. But that doesn't exist in the full-blown Copilot Studio as of right now. So hopefully that is kind of resolved shortly.
Are you thinking about analyst or researcher?
Nope, neither. I'm thinking
Okay.
in Copilot Studio, the full-blown agent,
Oh, okay.
it does not have a way to use that kind of scientific math understanding thing that I can't think of the name of. And it is there to be able to toggle on when in the Agent Builder experience, but not in the full-blown Copilot Studio. So anyway, it'll probably come to me by the time the show ends, and maybe I can jump in and sort of add that commentary. But file groupings, we already talked about. Don't need to talk about that again. The new tools experience, if you haven't checked that out, it's a really nice update for a nice way to bring all sorts of things together. We used to just have actions, and now actions are one thing, but we've got, custom connectors, we got prompts, we've got REST APIs, we got model context protocol. If you're part of it, you can also get to computer use agents, and all of those things are now tools, not just the actions pane. So take advantage of all of those new tools. Inside of the prompts area, so prompts kind of are standalone. You can make them in Copilot Studio. You can make them so that they're just used as part of Power Automate or a Power App or whatever else, that you just get to work in that prompt building experience. Well, when you're in that experience, one thing you can now use in the instructions is PowerFX. So PowerFX is just a first-party player in that creation of your prompt to be able to use it to do whatever you need to make sure that the agent takes the appropriate action when you feed it the full prompt. So PowerFX can do lots of transformations and date handling and all kinds of other stuff that's really helpful. The other one is a way to test your prompt and evaluate the accuracy of it and things like that right in the harness. So lots of things that you can do for test runs and looking at it over time and all that kind of stuff. Super helpful. PowerFX now will support regex. So you've been able to use regex for a little while when making entities, but now PowerFX is actually the regex when making entities in Copilot Studio, but now regex is going to be available from directly within PowerFX to use wherever PowerFX shows up. So that should be a really nice enhancement as well. And I'm super excited for this one to actually show up. We have wanted this for a long time, in that if you set up many different connectors inside of an agent and the agent calls one and you said, I want to use the end user's credentials, not the agent maker's credentials to work with this service, it would pop up a screen that the person had to go authenticate and all the kinds of other stuff to be able to use that other connector. Well, now it's going to be able to basically pull together all the services that would allow single sign-on with the token that you have signed on to the agent with, if you've authenticated at the agent level, to pass those same creds into all of the connectors that are out there. And as long as they allow SSO to pass, that should be a much more streamlined experience for those use cases. Looking forward to that. This one's also really cool, that because Copilot Studio supports multiple languages, at least in the generative orchestration pane, that makes it really easy to have a multilingual Copilot Studio agent itself. And because we have now turned on all of those languages, it used to only be English, you can now actually just flip that on for every language that we support if you need it to be multilingual to do all of that natively. The other bonus is if you have sub-agents, whether you are handing it off completely to another agent or it's just a sub-agent of this agent, those connected agents will understand what language a person has been communicating in within the parent bot. And when the conversation gets passed to the child agent, it will pass that context as well. So the child agent knows to do all of its processing and responding in that user's language from the parent agent as well. So pretty nice from a multilingual standpoint with those enhancements. Knowledge use, we are looking at a knowledge source analysis capability and an unanswered question thing that will both give you a bunch of insights into how to continuously improve the agent to both improve your knowledge and add knowledge to be able to answer more questions that people are actually asking of it. And then in the admin center, if you haven't seen it, we finally have a full listing of all agents in your tenant in the admin center for all Copilot Studio agents anyway, and doesn't handle the agent builder ones yet, but this is a big step forward. And my only complaint is it only shows 500 records and you have to actually do some searching to narrow it a little bit if you have more than 500 agents to be able to see them all. But other than that, it's a beautiful experience to be able to bring all that stuff together finally in one spot. So that is the romp through Copilot Studio stuff. Dataverse has an MCP server that is a standard MCP server that just comes natively in environments now to be able to utilize. And it is wonderful in terms of being able to connect up to it to allow you to do things in Dataverse across many different clients. So not only Copilot Studio, but it will then work in Claude or it'll work in GitHub Copilot and all that kind of stuff. The couple of things that it's worth mentioning is that right now, that only works within an environment talking to the Dataverse that is part of that environment. At the end of July, we're going to turn on a private preview of being able to connect to any other Dataverse environment with just changing the URL and to be able to do table manipulation and like creating and updating and deleting actual tables inside of Dataverse. So taking maker actions through its MCP server, not just end user actions of what data is stored in the tables and how can I kind of use MCP to retrieve or take action on the data that's within the table. So pretty cool stuff. If you're interested in those to turn on in private preview in your org, then click on the link. So lots of great stuff with MCP on top of Dataverse. If you use our Center of Excellence starter kit, just know July release is now out. Been a ton of bug fixes in it, so if you use it, you might as well apply them. We also have a brand new contract processing model that can just be called from within AI Builder. So, we've had things like the invoice processor or the business card reader. Well, we now have a contract processing model that just, as a SaaS service, knows what kind of stuff is in contracts and how to extract a bunch of the data from them that you might use wherever you might want to use them. And I put a link into some upcoming PowerCat webinars, and I thought it was very timely because the next one is a deep dive into how to think about governing all of the agents across your enterprise. That's coming out on the 16th. Go register. It should be a fantastic session. There'll be all sorts of other good ones for more of the makers coming up soon. So pay attention to those if you can spare the time to join them. Last one, and then I'll hand it over to you, Dan, is that if you use our Contact Center as a Service offering, whether it's Dynamics-based or standalone, we now have this thing called the Desktop Companion app. And I think I briefly talked about it a few shows ago, but it is now generally available, and essentially it becomes a kind of voice handling widget that doesn't rely on the browser. And browsers, especially when you start getting a whole bunch of tabs open, start losing memory context and start becoming a little bit flaky, and you don't want that to slow down your voice conversations. Well, if you have this desktop companion app, it's a small little app that just runs in the background, and it will allow you to have quicker, faster pickups and quicker, faster transfers, and the ability, even if your browser crashes, to not lose the call and be able to continue talking and do other call handling actions from within it, even if the browser is no longer there to do things the way you always used to. So use that to be more reliable as a contact center and faster as a contact center with all your voice things if you're using our CCAS product. And with that, I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to you, Dan, to cover all the other cool stuff we have.
All right, sounds good. It's like a lot of content again this week. Not a ton of content.
Always too much to get through.
Yeah, not a lot of ton of content on the ERP world, but let's just see. Let me know you can see the screen, Bart.
All good.
Okay, great. So just a few things here, and we'll start out with some Project Ops. I've been talking on Project Ops for the last 3 shows for the few weeks. So this is a nice consolidation about Wave or 2025 Wave 1 early access. If you want to go into this, if you want to opt into early access, you can see that early access for US, which is, I think, a significant portion of our viewership, is August 4th, and mid to late August for the rest of the geos. So first thing to notice that. But we've talked about some of these features before, but it's like, okay, we're removing the flags that this is going to be default before you can opt in for the project estimates. And so on the project estimates, this allows you to look at like a nice modern screen, right, on it. So, you can get the modern expenses line of Growsy, the editing of the grid, all on one nice little screen there. So I'm not going to go too much into depth about that, but you can look back in an earlier show to talk about that. But there's also the more modern code update. So the modern code update is included in this, and that creates the unified grid for the interface, which was kind of difficult to manage before, because it's like you'd have to drill down to another screen and then get to a field and edit there. Now it's like a unified grid. We can actually update the grid and update the whole code in a simple, easy manner, kind of like you would in an Excel spreadsheet, right? And I went through some more detail of this in March, if you will. There's also the customized grilling hub. I went through this a little bit in April. But on the customized grilling billing hub, this allows you to nest contracts together with the contract lines together, and then you get the actuals, right? And so the actuals for what you need to actually bill out on that. So you can get that from out of the box, whether you post an hour, a fee, a line item, or a product in there, you can do that. There's also APIs from Project Operations into this, of course, the standard API. But we can also use Power Automate Flow and invoke that API. So that's another way to get that in there. And then you can synchronize from, finance and operations into the Dataverse from that, because remember, it's 2 different systems together, 3 different flavors, if you will. We can import it or just use custom fields on that. So that's on the contract hub for that. Also kind of want to go into a little bit about production order types in Business Central. And I think this is kind of important if you're a Business Central user. There's multiple different production order types. So there's simulated, planned, firm, released, and finished. All you really need to do are the released and finished. So these other ones are optional. So let's talk about this. So first of all, a simulated production order. So if you just want to cost something else, if you have a bill of material in a routing, you simulate it. It's like, okay, what's the roll-up cost going to be for this? That's what it does. It gives you a roll-up cost. So you can say, it's like, okay, this is going to cost us $14.20 or whatever it might be per unit that you're going to produce. Unplanned production orders. So this is going to come through as a plan from an MRP. So it's like, okay, this is dependent demand, right? From like a sales order or something else, or a reorder point, or it could be anything like that. And it's going to create a planned production order. It's like then you can actually execute that to release that production order from that, or a firm planned production order. So you can say, it's like, okay, this is a production order. I want to firm this production order, so it actually saves a hold place. So when you're scheduling out, you can have your actual executed or released orders along with your firm plan production orders, and be able to look at the schedule to be able to run your production. And then the two required ones are release production order and the finished production order. A release production order is, okay, now I'm able to release it, which is going to go to the shop floor. You might have a traveler that goes with it, or basically a piece of paper that goes with it around, which many companies do. But this allows you to post things like labor and material and then other things to it. So it can be produced from a planned order. It can be produced manually. You can do it from a sales order directly if it's a made-to-order environment, other things like that. Now, the thing about there's a warning on this release, and I think this is kind of a nice little thing to call out. So if you manually release this production order and you have forward flushing turned on, which means that we're going to consume the material when we release the order. There's something called back flushing, was we consume it after we finish it, but or do it manually or when you actually execute those goods. But on pre-flushing, you actually need to do a re-release and refresh that to actually get those to work. And then there's a finished production order. A finished production order basically posts everything to that transaction. What material did we consume? What scrap did we have? What labor did we have? So on and so forth. Also puts the overhead on that. So basically, it's now we can cost and compare it against what it should be. For a standardized cost item, it's going to be variances on it. For a non-standard, it's going to calculate any adjustments that you have put onto there versus the planned on that. So you can do your analysis. I talked about this on the last show. It's like one of the greatest features that we've had for this production orders. We can now open them up and then finished, and then maybe I have some other postings, maybe I have some outside processing that's done on that, post that, and then finish that order. But you can only do that once. I talked about that on the last show. So that's production order types in Business Central. Also, there's AP, accounts payable in Business Central, right? And basically these are, for payment journals. It's like, what do we have to pay for a payable? That might be what receive goods or raw material that we get in and things on the side. So there's three different types, three functionalities. So we have the payment journal. So this is simply to pay your vendors, right? Based on the payment suggestions, based upon terms or discounts that we get from that, right? All the remittances and invoices you get for those invoices. Also, is going to add item charges. There might be some overhead to this. So it might cost $1 a unit, but you might have some insurance on top of that, which is like maybe 3 cents, and then some freight, which is 5 cents. So it's actually going to post the actual cost for that unit. It was $1.08, right? So it actually puts those onto there. And then the third thing is employer reimbursements. So it's like if you have an expense account or something like that, business expenses, reimbursement from that. So on the Wave 1 enhancements for 2025, first of all, there's a sales order agent. So it auto drafts the replies from a sales order, which is really nice. We've seen this in sales automation for quite a while. It's dripped down to Business Central at this point. AI-driven suggestions for like inventory. It's like, okay, what do we need and what do we need to sell, so on and so forth, or suggestions for selling. Enhanced workflows and automated PO matching, like a 3-way match, and then summarizing complex orders into invoices that we actually need to pay. So it's like it takes diverse data and puts it together. There's also some better reporting in this. In the Wave 1, there's better Power BI integration. There's no templates for Excel. And there's metadata layouts, so you can actually make it really easy to do those layouts in Word, which we've had in finance and supply chain for quite a while. So also, it's like, the nice integrations into other Microsoft tools for Outlook, Teams, and Word, Excel, so on and so forth into that. So some nice updates within Wave 2 for Business Central that are coming up. Now, in finance and supply chain, I like these articles that we're going to talk about here from Dynamic Communities because it talks a little bit about, cycle accounting into this. And it's by Crystal Ahrens. Excellent. She's a customer, has been a customer within several different, she's been employed at several different customers. Just really good. She's an expert, an MVP with finance and supply chain. But she really does a nice job of explaining what you want to do for these cycle counts, right? And how it's done. So, and it does a better job than actually the documentation because the documentation goes into depth. But so it talks about it like, how do we trigger these cycle counts? Remember, a cycle count is instead of doing a full inventory count, which we count everything in the inventory after we shut it down and then count it, we'll count things during the day. So you can have threshold-based triggers. So Oftentimes, if it goes to zero, it's like we get a free cycle count. Let's validate the zero in there. It's like it's just not one or two that we didn't take into trigger for. So it might be a threshold. It might be a parameter driven. And so you often think of ABC. It's like, so A may be our, our high velocity, B is a mid velocity, C our small velocity, or it might be by cost or price on that too. But it's like you might want to count A's, certain A's, it's like every day, certain B's weekly, and then C's like monthly. But you'll have to do it, make sure we cycle count everything through at least the year, right? So there's parameter, and then by different zones. So you might have different zones. You might have a high velocity zone, so like maybe some flow racks that it's like you want to count more often just to make sure that they're accurate, versus other ones it's like you don't want to state that. So she does a nice job of categorizing that. There's also some enhancements in the cycle counting for mobile. Now the first is blind versus guided counting. So it's like blind counting. It's like I don't know how much it's going to be in there. I'm going to count, and then it's like it's going to. And you say if it's like I'm off on my count, it's like, okay, recount it just to validate, and then I'm going to do it versus guided. Guided is faster. Blind is actually more accurate. There's recount validations based upon the tolerance level. So I said if there's supposed to be 100 and there's 99, it's like, oh, that's fine. These are widgets, and it's like, people just grab them, and we just have to have an idea of what it is. But when it gets down too low, then we need to have to replenish those or something just to make sure we validate. And then there's reason codes. Okay, well, why do we think this is off? Are people taking it from like maintenance and not actually recording in the inventory system? So you actually get traceability and get to the root cause of why things are happening on that. There's some nice advanced analytic tools for optimization that we have here. So like heat maps. Okay, where are we pulling the inventory from? It's like, okay, if we're in the back of the warehouse and there's a red heat map that we're actually doing lots of pulls from here, maybe we should actually move that inventory closer to where it's needed, maybe to the front of the warehouse. So it gives you a nice visual to see. It's like, okay, make sure you track that critical inventory. There's license plate reconciliations. It's like, so if you find, miscounts on that, so it's like, okay, license plate is like everything maybe on a pallet, might be multiple different goods. And so we can actually validate versus certain license plates. And then, partial locations. So it's like it might be a bin instead of a storage location that you want to do a partial thing. She also talks about some nice third-party integration capabilities, which allow you okay, so one that she recommended, a cycle count scheduler by InsightWorks, but it has velocity-based prioritization, custom user-friendly calendars, and some nice notifications that are nice. And she talks about 3 things for best practices. So first thing, set threshold levels, right? For the units is that we're going to do. Adapt a hybrid approach. You want to make sure that you have automated schedules for routine stuff and manual spot counts for high impact variances, right? So it's like, okay, especially critical goods on that. And then make sure you simplify the mobile interface, kind of learn through experience through that. So a little bit about cycle counting. And the last thing I have today is MES and shop floor control, manufacturing execution, or shop floor controls, traditionally what it's been called. But at Microsoft, we call it PFE, right? And so on PFE, that's production floor execution. So another acronym. I think Microsoft's famous for acronyms. So basically, if you think of PFE, it's MES or shop floor control, more closely related with an MES system, right? So it talks about like the real-time visibility. So you'll have real-time visibility into when things are executing. So for instance, like I started this job, I consumed this much material, I finished how many out of, I have to do 10, I've finished 3 so far, and I have this much scrap. So you have real-time postings into that. You'll see where the process is going. What this is going to help you do is reduce errors and stuff, or like, and then also, if you barcode, instead of typing in, and it's like, I seem to be getting worse at typing the older I get, but, a lot of fat fingering and, things like that cause errors. But if you barcode, it's 99.9999% efficient to be or accurate to do that. Also, it's just more efficient to do it that way instead of writing things or scrapping or so on and so forth, or having paper and then having somebody else write that in, and then actually getting accurate costing and consumption materials, which flows all the way through to finance and then of course planning into that. So we have that right. Also, it's like gives you the analytics. So you're consuming all this material, all this data you have through the data tables. the data entity tables, access to all that information. So you can use Power BI into this. So you can get your OEE, or overall equipment effectiveness, from that. You can actually see any variances like root cause analysis, and you can start slicing and dicing that a whole lot better. Also, by using this, it's better quality tracking. So it's like if you have something finish in order, it can kick off a quality order, so we can do a quality test on that. I want to hazard you that it doesn't actually allow you to do the quality test right within the PFE. That's something I've asked for from our product team. We'll see what, and I know it's on the list of potential future enhancements, but it's not there yet. So it's going to kick off something else. You have to go to a different interface to actually do that quality order. But it does do the traceability. So it tracks the lots and the batches on that. So, basically it's like, for job management, so execution of the job just makes it a whole lot easier what I need to do. Time and attendance, it doesn't do the time cards directly, but you can extract that information out, do the time cards into the time and attendance system. Material management for consumption of what we need. And then quality reporting, that's something that's a little ambitious that you put that in there. Digital work instructions are really nice because it's like, sometimes if you do engineer to order, you build to the diagram or the blueprint. And so I've seen that in many different very complex shops, very skilled workers out there that do that. But also it's like, if I don't know how to do something, let's do a video, let's show me how to do something. So we have all these digital assets we can pull. And then it's a collaborative system within that. So a nice little discussion on, shop floor control, or PFE, which is a production floor execution system. So that's what I have this week, Bart. And it's like we're over quite a bit, but that's kind of standard with how much stuff we have to show.
We just got lots of cool news to share, right?
Yep. And lots of updates as always.
Solutions are always being updated.
Yep.
Just going to take control for just a second again, because I found the thing I was thinking of, and it's called Code Interpreter. So that's the thing I was talking about. If you turn that on, it can do math.
That's going to be in jeopardy here for a $2,000 question soon enough there, Bart. So Ken's Jennings will know that. Yeah.
Well, thanks all for joining, and we will catch you all in a fortnight with even more news.
All right. Take care, everybody.